The President. Dr. Lo Wai-kwok. Mr. President, the Financial Secretary announced the 2019-2020 budget on the 27th of February 2019. In the budget, it is said that to relieve the burden on taxpayers, the budget will propose a one-off reductions of salaries tax under personal assessment and profits tax for the year of assessment 2018 and 2019 by 75% with a ceiling of $20,000. On the 20th of March 2019, after Gazetto, the administration tabled the bill, and that is the Inland Revenue Amendment Tax Concessions Bill 2019, which seeks to amend Cap 112, the IRO, to implement the above proposal. The Bills Committee was subsequently set up to scrutinize the bill. On the 26th of April 2019, the Bills Committee submitted a report to the House Committee indicating that the Bills Committee has no objection to the resumption of the second reading debate on the bill. The Bills Committee and the administration at the time both indicated that no amendment would be moved as there was not any controversy surrounding the bill. Originally, on the 26th of June 2019, the bill was supposed to be supposed to go through the resumption of second reading and third reading in this council. Unfortunately, the council business was severely interfered with by the opposition camp. The electrical complex was severely vandalized to the extent that not until today has the resumption of second reading and third reading of the bill been included in the council business. And Mr. President, according to the administration, when drawing up one-off relief measures and reductions, the administration would take into account social needs and the economic situation, etc. As for the one-off relief measures proposed in the budget altogether, amounts to $42.9 billion. Comparing to the consolidated surplus in 2019, it constitutes not a large percentage. Well, but according to the figures announced on the 30th of April, in the last financial year, the consolidated surplus recorded was $68 billion, up by $9.3 billion comparing to the previous year. However, this amount was still smaller than the $200 billion surplus recorded the previous year. As for the tax and the rates rebates and the other one-off relief measures, the amounts caused quite a disappointment. What is of our concern is that there is political unrest stemming from the extradition bill, and the unrest has gone on for 4 months. Although the government proposed 4 actions on the 4th of September, including withdrawal of the bill to allay public concern, and also the emergency regulations ordinance was invoked, and that the face covering regulation would take effect on took effect on the 5th of October to prevent face covering of rioters and to assist the police in enforcing the law. However, as we could see, there was escalation of violence, and the rioters continued to vandalize shops and MTR stations, and they also used lethal weapons such as sharpened sticks and poles to endanger the safety and lives of police officers. And social unrest continues together with and it never rains but pours. With global economic uncertainties, there is increased downward pressure on our economy. The Hong Kong SAR government already lowered the economic or the annual economic growth to 0 to 1%. With the drastic downturn of the economy, the SMEs in the business sector are in dire straits. In the end of July, the BPA put forward a proposal to the government to for supporting SMEs and businesses, and the Financial Secretary rapidly responded to our request. And in the middle of August, the Financial Secretary put forward a basket of measures, relief measures. In terms of relief measures, the Financial Secretary announced that the tax rebate rates would be increased from 75% to 100%, while retaining the ceiling of $20,000 per case. There is also electricity bill subsidy of $2,000 per household, and also a waiver of rents for the public rental housing tenants, so as to boost consumption confidence. In terms of businesses, there are also 7 new measures proposed by the government. For example, 27 fees and charges of the government will be exempted for 12 months, and there is also the relief under the SME financing guarantee scheme and the BUD fund to relieve the burden on SMEs and to increase the competitive edge, so as to boost the local economy. $19.1 billion are expected to be involved. Altogether, these 2 series of measures would involve $62 billion. Comparing to $68 billion of consolidated surplus in 2018-19, it is a huge proportion, and members would have noticed that the President already gave the permission to dispense with the notice, and a committee-stage amendment will be moved to reflect the further increase of the tax deduction rate from 75% to 100%. As for other fee waiver proposals, subsidiary legislation may be amended, and subsequent funding applications may be made for legislative approval. The BPA would like the measures to be implemented so that SMEs could benefit as soon as possible. Having said that, I think the question to be asked is as follows. Even if all the relief measures are implemented, can we really help improve people's livelihood and relieve their burden? The answer is no. With escalating violence put forward by rioters, it is dealing a great blow to the whole community. We have sports and mega events being cancelled one after another, tarnishing our image as the city of mega events. As for tourist arrivals, the figures have continued to decrease. In August, the total inbound tourist figures have dropped by 40%. For mainland tourists, the drop was 42%. Many travel agencies are on the brink of closing down, and we have been contacting the industry to understand their needs. On the 10th of October, myself and my party members met with the Financial Secretary and Mr. Edward Yao, the Secretary for Commerce and Economic Development, to reflect the plight of our industry and to make recommendations. We hope the administration would roll out measures, relief measures targeting the concerned industries. The Financial Secretary announced a 3rd series of relief measures. 6 months of fuel subsidy would be provided to the transportation sector and commercial vehicles, and there would also be a waiver rent for 50% and also other support measures. The measures would involve a spending of $5 billion. It is believed that these measures would help SMEs out of their plight. The BPA will also closely monitor the local economic situation. We hope the administration would roll out more relief measures in a timely manner to support enterprises and protect employment and improve people's livelihood. The problem is, with disturbances and unrest in the street, there is widespread panic among the public. Foreign investors and tourists are staying away from Hong Kong. Many people in different professions and businesses have urged the government to take effective and harsh measures and to take effective law enforcement action to curb the violence. After all, if we want to develop the economy and allow people to live in a peaceful environment, we need a stable economy. If our economy takes a downturn, there will not be sufficient government revenue to improve people's livelihood, let alone sharing the fruit of economic success with the people. In order to make a breakthrough from the current situation, we need a united effort. Unfortunately, on the 1st of July, the electoral complex was severely vandalized, such that council meeting and also other committee meetings such as a finance committee and other additional meetings could not be convened. It took us really hard effort to restore the complex. Many members have reflected to members of the opposition camp that we need to focus on people's livelihood, and after restoration of the electoral complex, we should consider the funding applications related to livelihood items, and there should not be any filibustering delaying the process. Unfortunately, since the beginning of this session, what we have seen is that even for the chief executive to deliver the policy addresses in this council and to answer members' questions, these could not be done. And there have been varying degrees of delay in terms of the election of chair and deputy chair for various panels and committees. And I am very worried. I really hope that the normal order can be resumed in this council. In fact, while we have had a backlog of funding applications in the Finance Committee, but we still have $7 billion worth of public works projects items involving 14,000 jobs. These projects include hospitals, community halls, and drainage improvements. These are all livelihood-related items. Because of delay in the funding approval, construction workers are out of job, and this is not just scaremongering. According to the Federation of Construction Industry, because of filibustering in the current environment in Hong Kong, livelihood-related funding items have yet to be approved, and they have 15 trades, and starting from the 1st of November, the pay for these 15 trades will be frozen, and this is the first time since many years. It is expected that 130,000 workers will be affected. The industry, therefore, strongly urges electoral members, especially those from the pro-establishment camp, to expedite the approval of funding applications so as to address the imbalance in the construction industry. I also urge everybody, with great sincerity, to put aside our differences and stop bickering. We should do real work for the people, for the sustainable development of Hong Kong and for creating a harmonious society and to create upward mobility for our next generation. Only by doing so can we solve deep-seated conflicts in Hong Kong. I so submit, Mr. President. I support the passage of Inland Revenue Amendment Tax Concessions Bill 2019 and also the amendment to be moved by the administration.
Mr. Christopher Cheung. President, this bill was introduced by the Financial Secretary in this year's budget. The government proposed to reduce taxes so that taxpayers can be benefited. It was scheduled to be discussed on the 20th of June, but because LegCo was besieged on the 12th of June and then vandalized on the 1st of July. That's why we have to wait until we have returned from the summer break. And today is the first opportunity to discuss this bill. Or I think all taxpayers would like to see the passage of this bill as early as possible. Earlier, FS also announced that in order to further reduce the burden on taxpayers in respect of the ceiling of percentage of reductions would increase from 75% to 100%, subject to the same ceiling of $20,000 per case. As a result, employees with modest income or businesses with a small profit would not have to pay anything in tax. This relief measure introduced by the FS is very timely because after the controversy surrounding the fugitive offenders bill erupted, we have rioters setting fire all the places and vandalize MTR stations, and they also besieged the airport. People are afraid of going out to shop and have meals. For people who have barely been able to make ends meet, and also to people working in the travel industries, have to face tremendous pressure in the face of deterioration of business. 1.443 million taxpayers and businesses will be benefited, and the tax money saved will be $1.44 billion. Well, this is indeed a timely relief. Many small businesses and grassroots will stand to benefit. I think the ceiling of $20,000 per business is just nothing but it's just better than nothing. We have 4 months of continuous turmoil. Many businesses and many employees have suffered losses and reduction in income, and the amount involved can easily exceed $20,000. The FS said in his blog yesterday that when he met with trade representatives, the consensus was that the global slowdown of the economy, trade conflicts, and political situations have all conspired to create a great pressure for economic downturn. And we have also internal strife. So these external and internal factors have made our economy plagued with looming crisis. And it's been forecast by the FS that the annual growth rate can easily drop to 0%. It's the worst in 10 years. And we're still in the dark, and we haven't seen the light of the tunnel at the end of the tunnel. We don't know when that moment would come. Therefore, I support this bill and the amendment, and that is raising the percentage ceiling from 75% to 100%. And I'm also in favor the government to step up and offer more to help businesses who are affected by the turmoil. Because while their revenue has dropped, their outgoing and expenses have to be kept up, and I'm not counting the cost of damages and vandalism. They have to tighten their belt. And if the business remains poor, they can't continue for long, and in the coming winter seasons, we may see a lot of businesses going under, and there will be a massive wave of unemployment. I think to stop the top priority must be to stop the violence. Relief measures are just for relief. If the social atmosphere remains chaotic and people are not willing to go out to spend money on weekends, then however many relief measures are introduced will not help much. It's just like a patient losing a lot of blood. We should try to stop the hemorrhage. Otherwise, blood transfusion, however much you can do to give the patient blood, is not going to help him a lot or for a long time. With this unprecedented riot facing in Hong Kong, I hope the government would enhance the police capacity to enforce the law and to offer better protection for our life and property, so that the businesses adversely affected would stand a chance to recover, and grassroots employees would see livelihood improve in the future. Unfortunately, we haven't heard much about the confidence in the government successfully putting an end to violence. And we are seeing just an escalation of protests and riots. And then the police are finding it very difficult to cope, and they have to face unreasonable accusation from the media. And the police had to handle 4 bogus bombs last week. One of them was found in a very busy district. And to put it bluntly, Hong Kong is now very much like a city of terror. If the government does not come up with strong measures to stop the violence, Hong Kong will be doomed. And this year, the Christmas season and the Lunar New Year are close to one another. If we cannot put a stop to violence, this golden opportunity, this golden consumption period will be lost. And then we will need to have the 4th and the 5th round of relief measure, and yet we cannot save much. We cannot help many businesses. In this connection, I would like to talk about security firms, small and medium-sized security firms, which have also been affected by the recent turmoil because investors are staying away from the market. But these security firms are not getting any help from the 3 rounds of relief measures. So I urge the FS to do something in next year's financial budget and help those security firms in distress. There should be some relief provided to them to lessen their burden. We are approaching very fast, the golden Christmas period. We should work even harder on restoring the confidence of visitors and citizens alike. And the FS should do more in providing reductions and relief. For example, reduction of salary tax should have the ceiling raised to $30,000, and the percentage can be kept at 100% so as to benefit even the middle class. And the raise concession for businesses should be increased substantially to help businesses to cope with the severe economic winter. And since the unrest and turmoil has affected a wide range of businesses, I would like to urge the government to do something to help businesses which will not have to pay any profits tax this year because of the business loss they suffered this year, so that more support can be provided to grassroots and small businesses in the future. With these remarks, I support the passage of this bill so that the taxpayers can, before the next tax-paying season, receive the benefits of the concession and reduction, so as to lessen the financial burden.
Ms. Anohin, Mr. Andrew Lang, members, as you know, I will not be a electoral member much longer. I might be gone anytime. It might be good news. Some of you might be glad. But at the start of a new session, I promise that so long as I'm electoral member, I will continue to discharge my duties. For the Inland Revenue Amendment Tax Concessions Bill 2019, I have been following discussions from different members, and here are my views on the bill. In terms of one-off reductions of salaries tax, tax under personal assessment, and profits tax, I think we should look at the background. Apparently, a lot of people would benefit, and indeed, many people would benefit every year. And for the original reductions, 2.05 million people would benefit, and the total benefits amount to $18.9 billion. The ceiling or the rebate percentage would be increased from 75% to 100%, and the amount totals $1.8 billion. At the end of February 2019, when the budget was announced, it was heavily criticized by the pro-Beijing and pro-democracy camp. The budget was criticized as being too biased towards innovation and technology. But for other aspects such as housing, welfare, social benefit, the investments are lacking. And as for welfare measures, they proved to be controversial. For example, the decision to acquire properties for the so-called sweeteners, they were even worse than the year before. For student subsidy, it went from 2,000 to 2,500. For the elderly healthcare voucher scheme, the accumulation limit was raised from 5,000 to 8,000 limits. For the other allowance, it went from triple. The bonus payment went from triple to only double. And the tax relief has not been particularly generous. But we saw that yesterday Mr. Paul Chan rolled out new measures, and on the 15th of August, after the anti-extradition law movement broke out and a general strike, he said the protests have led to an economic downturn, and he is fully waiving the taxes, $2,500 subsidy for primary and secondary school students. So the support has been reinforced. But in terms of the policy making process, the approach is still piecemeal. There is no systematic approach to tackle our economic issues. We have been talking about an economic downturn since the start of the year. Before the movement broke out, there was no extradition law amendment at that time. We have seen that the China-US trade war was affecting our economy. Many people now are blaming the protests and the riots or filibustering at LegCo. But many economists of course, the recent protests would affect certain sectors such as retail and catering. But our economy is primarily affected by the global climate. The market downturn today is due to a decline in the European markets and the Chinese market, so you cannot blame the protests all the time. With regards to the tax reductions, I want to quote a book published by Chonghua Bookstore, and it is a book about Hong Kong, and one of the chapters is dedicated to the connection between Hong Kong politics and our economy. Hong Kong's tax policy, including tax relief measures, is not systematic, and businesses and taxpayers could not enjoy the fruits of our economy. Many studies have created a category for East Asian economies for developmental welfare states, productivist welfare capitalism. Well, Hong Kong is not a country, but Hong Kong has been categorized in this context. Many East Asian states embrace totalitarianism, and development and productivity are always of higher priority than their people. So we always talk about growth, but there is no focus on livelihood. For developing welfare states, they would dish out sweeteners to garner support from the people, and the main tax measures place an emphasis on economic growth, and the top priority or objective is development of the state. Other features include considering welfare a form of reinvestment, and the poor people do not truly benefit. Only businesses and the rich would benefit. The social expenditure ratio is low. Our social expenditure is lower than many comparable economies. There is high labor elasticity, and these describe Hong Kong's situation. Our recurrent expenditure is low. We are only aiming to achieve short-term welfare targets. That's why we rolled out the the working family allowance, or the WITS. If you want to roll out equitable welfare measures, you should not have means tests. So the government's welfare policy has been rather mean. And that is why we see these tax relief measures for the rates waivers or salary tax waivers. The richer classes would benefit more. For the grassroots or the at nothing people, their benefits would be very limited. So we are looking at a few long-term consequences. According to the book, Hong Kong is an open economy for investment. We have the highest FDI to GDP ratio among the 4 Asian tigers, and such approach to welfare would mean Hong Kong is vulnerable to financial turmoil globally, and with the 2008 global financial crisis, even after that, our financial secretary did not learn their lesson. They remain extremely short-term in addressing welfare issues. That's why we have such a serious poverty gap. Many people talk about enhancing public expenditure, while some people call this Keynesian, but we have never embraced this approach. Since you did not reinforce public expenditure, you cannot weather the global storm. So you are waiving salaries tax or business taxes, and you are offering various concessions, but this is not something that would benefit everyone in the form of social security. So in terms of housing, education, and healthcare expenditure, they are substantial, but in terms of social protection or labor protection, they are lacking. These days, we talk about social rifts. Because the pro-Beijing camp would simplify the political and economic issues as the failure to house. And this led to a very serious poverty gap, and the tax relief cannot benefit every class in our community. And the chapter talked about using non-recurrent expenditure to deal with demands, and the businesses would transfer such costs to the workers, and the problems cannot be dealt with using financial discipline. The government has been talking about boosting the economy, but when we talk about improving the economy, we cannot ignore needs of the community. So the economy and the tax relief measures adequate? I want to recommend an article written by Danny Roderick. He's a professor from the University of Columbia.
Big government， 佢問大家就係話，其實大家點解會即係一個開放啲嘅經濟體系 到頭嚟會得到一個大啲嘅政府。
Well, the common view is that we should not have a big government. We should have a small government. But when we look at governments around the world, the structure is rather cumbersome, not because the establishment is complicated, but it's about really benefiting the local economy. So people have been blaming the lack of effort from the government in curbing violence. I think this is not the crux. The key is whether our policies can specifically address the global financial downturn. Are we just offering tax relief, or are we going to invest in our community? So in the gist, I would say that if you want to attract more foreign capital, tax relief is not enough. You should reinforce the expenditure infrastructure or establishment, and these non-recurrent relief measures cannot really benefit the people. Some people wonder how we are going to deal with such conflicts. So it's about the government answering the 5 demands. Are they going to answer the core of people's demands? And this is proportional to the conflicts that take place. If you answer the demands, we will be able to find a way out. Thank you.
Mr. Jeffrey Lam, I support the government tax relief measures and hope that the bill can be passed as soon as possible to benefit enterprises and individuals. Hong Kong's current situation is in dire straits. At the beginning of this year, when the budget was first announced, I believe a lot of people couldn't imagine how things have gotten to this. From objection to the extradition bill to become against the government and advocating for Hong Kong independence. For all the rhetoric, you cannot shield the atrocities committed by protesters in assaulting people, vandalizing shops. The public had become lawless. And economic-wise, you can see things took a sharp downturn. The tourism industry has been important to Hong Kong. And the riotous acts have made a lot of countries have issued travel advisory on Hong Kong. And the recent visitors' arrival had taken a nosedive. Retail, hotel industry, and F&B sectors related to tourism is grim. A lot of the events and conferences have been cancelled or moved to elsewhere. We can see traffic lights and the destruction to the transport system, which caused a lot of accidents. Well, that was caused by damaged traffic lights. We see a lot of people wouldn't dare to venture out at night because they can't tell when there will be riots, and when at weekends the rioters and vandalists across the territory, people have to stay home to protect their own safety. A lot of economic activity has been disrupted. A lot of the SME boss have told us they will lose bleeding money every month. Their business and their wealth have become depleted. They're now left with nothing. Business closure affected workers' livelihood. Recently, a lot of them were on unpaid furlough, or even been given the pink slips, which made rather helpless and worrying. The BPA had proposed at the beginning of this year for a maximum relief of $35,000, and this year the ceiling had been slashed from to $20,000. I know that the public as SMEs are disappointed. Back in August, the government, and due to changing circumstances, that the waiving percentage had raised from 75 to 100%, which I see as a breakthrough. From time to time, we appeal to the government to could be more daring in this tax relief. You want to benefit the public, you may as well just have a full waiver. If for the 3/4 waiver that the IOD must issue a tax demand note with add to admin costs and let the public to think that this is only a half-baked and half-sincere effort. For future tax reliefs, if you are not breaching a certain percentage, you just directly save the paperwork. Even though Hong Kong enjoy a low tax rate, and however we have high living costs, especially for the middle class. They pay lots of taxes but entitled to little welfare, and they have parents and children to take care of. So they spend more despite their high income. Well, and they're neither eligible for subsidized housing. What the government can only for are really relief measures, in this case, tax relief. So the government must know what the middle class real living like and understand the public expectation of a tax rebate. The protests recently have showed the general dissatisfaction on one aspect of the society, which include a lot of middle class. The middle class contribution and the commitment to our society should be recognized by the government. That's because they made money, they ask them to be expect to be self-reliant. The top priority for the government, of course, is to make good use of resources and develop the economy and improve the livelihood so that all strata in society can benefit. As we have enjoyed an aging population, the welfare resources will be inclined towards certain social classes. The social services not able to cover the most indeed, and the middle class, let alone them. And how did you have a lot of needs? For example, daycare services, quality education, and healthcare, or hiring foreign domestic helpers. Since they're not entitled to any government welfare, the middle classes will need to procure them from the market. For example, need to purchase their own health insurance and to choose full-day kindergarten for the kids. This all costs money, so they all add up. So tax rebates provide them more money in their wallet and would improve their liquidity. When you consider a tax rebate next time, you can be more generous to them. President Delechko had passed a certain internal revenue amendment bill, for example, boosting the tax deduction limit for the voluntary health insurance and the annuity products. I see this a positive direction through offering tax allowances to provide incentive to encourage the public to choose, and so they can plan ahead for their health care and old age. However, some public may not be too familiar with the tax allowances, since tax allowance may not as direct. The government to step up as publicity. Besides voluntary health insurance and the annuity itself must be attractive and better than the existing product. So people will not buy for the tax allowance and buy some product they don't not suitable for them. For the SME, the profit tax relief equally important. Hong Kong's economy, even though it's still holding up, and yet each sector have their respective challenges, and the resilience of the SME is rather fragile. So sometimes every nickel counts. The current trade war situation, especially the extra tariff proposed by the U.S., have been ongoing, which affect a lot of sectors. And with the end of chaos in Hong Kong nowhere in sight, so we expect the trade dispute to last for a while, and like some may said, the predicted that it will become the new normal. The market instability will affect businesses. A lot of the companies have been cautious on the defensive. The government had accepted BPA proposal implementing the two-tier profit tax system and helping a lot of SMEs. Indeed, profit tax rebate allowance of 20 to 30,000 per year will offer a breather to them. Tax deduction or allowances may be better than cash handouts. The cash handouts are quite complicated and generate a lot of administrative costs, and also need to wait for a long time to receive the check. The government should reflect whether it should continue with this. The business sector have been carrying the disadvantaged, while the developed economy, the government should help those in need. And yet welfareism must have its limits to ensure that you can't have an infinite growth in the expenditure. The government should spend where it matters and in the right places. I believe that having these measures are better than cash handouts. On the age demographic and reduced productivity, in the long run, our economy can really cope. On the expenditure on housing and elderly care and so on. Even though we're sitting on $1 trillion of surplus, and yet there are a lot of bills to be paid in the future. And we also have a colossal expenditure. The current reserves couldn't last for a decade. It just can last for 1 to 2 years. So that's why we need a stable revenue source. We know this trillion reserves, together with our foreign reserve, are mainly to stabilize our financial system. At the same time, the government can study for some long-term measures to inspire the public confidence in the long-term prospects. And the handouts in the budgets are merely piecemeal. We need to invest in the future. To invest in the future, we need to have a comprehensive philosophy and mindset so that our tax regime provide momentum for economic growth. The violent protests and a lot of a smear of Hong Kong elsewhere, and the foreign media reporting of Hong Kong have demonstrated bias. Hong Kong's image, our international image, have been tarnished. In attracting foreign capital and talent, there will be some adverse impact on both. We need to tell the world of the objective situation that Hong Kong is still a good place for business. We need to be more proactive in using taxation tools to attract enterprises and talent to Hong Kong. All along, our simple and low tax system is a selling point. We should let the world know more and also continue enhancement so to make our tax regime more competitive, to entice more foreign companies to start business in Hong Kong, even serve as a regional headquarters. And we'll also make use of our Greater Bay Area advantage to attract foreign capital to Hong Kong, to serve as the financial and trade springboard. President, very soon the tax department will issue a new tax demand note. As long as this bill has not passed, the demand note will not able to set out the new amount after the tax relief. Hopefully, later today or tomorrow we can pass this bill and implement the measures to facilitate the IRD's work. I so submit.
Mr. Houghton Chow. President, I'm speaking on the Inland Revenue Amendment Tax Concession Bill 2019. It has my support. The bill aims to alleviate the burden of taxpayers. The 2019-2020 budget proposes one-off reduction of salary tax, tax under personal assessment, and profits tax for year of assessment 2018 to 2019 by 75%, subject to a ceiling of $20,000 per case. So this bill is here to implement this tax proposal. The one-off reduction would benefit 1.91 taxpayers who pay salary tax or tax under personal assessment, and also 145,000 profits tax paying business or non-incorporated businesses. $17 billion can be attributed to the salary tax and personal assessment tax, and $19 billion attributed to profits tax. This will be reflected in the tax assessment for 2019-2020. And there's been a further amendment that is in terms of percentage, it will be raised from 75% to 100%. This further measure would benefit 143,000 taxpayers, so that taxpayers will save $1.84 billion further to the previous proposal. I support this measure to increase the ceiling from 75% to 100%. Of course, there are calls saying that this doesn't help much if it's just about adjusting the percentage from 75% to 100%. I would say that that's a relaxation. That's an improvement anyway. It would help the sandwich class to some extent. But I need to point out that this tax reduction is just a drop in the bucket in the light of the prevailing economic situation, because in the past 4 months we have been facing with a very serious social unrest. The business environment for different trades and businesses have been subject to a severe blow. If we just look at government statistics for the retail industry, we have seen the business volume drop for the 7 consecutive months. Many shops are damaged by the protests and vandalism. Some have to close for business, and the catering trade and the retail trade are bearing the brunt. Provisional statistics for that trade is $29 billion plus, a drop of 23%. And that is the biggest month-to-month drop since 1981. For retail, the travel industry and catering industry, they have been adversely affected by the economic downturn, and the sentiment is also very pessimistic. I'm afraid that the employment rate would decline. The unemployment rate would continue to climb. In August, the unemployment rate stood at 2.9%. It was said to be a slight increase, but that's the first increase in 2 years. According to past experience, when the unemployment rate increases, it can do so very rapidly. And the general public, especially the grassroots workers, are faced with a very serious alarm. In the past 4 months, because of frequent unrest, we are facing a lot of financial risk. Externally, we also have to cope with the U.S.-China trade war. that would be a very important external factor affecting Hong Kong's economy and putting Hong Kong at great risk. In the past month, the DAB communicated with the government on a number of occasions. We would like to see SMEs taken care of by the government through certain measures introduced by the government in order that they can survive. And we mean, firstly, the government should take the lead to reduce rent or half the rent payable for GPA held government property for 6 months or a year, so as to take the lead. And it's hoped that other landlords and developers can also follow suit and reduce rent drastically for 6 months to a year, so the shop owners, shop and businesses can be given some relief. During the SARS epidemic, major landlords were willing to reduce rent by 30 to 50% for some 6 months. And subsequently, the government announced that for government properties or land owned by the GPA and for the market pitches and shops, there will be a rent reduction. But that's not sufficient. We would like to see something done which would be sufficient to encourage other landlords to reduce rent, so the retail industries and SMEs can be giving a helping hand to tie over the difficult period. And we also hope the government can talk to the banking industry, which can result in banks giving more support to SMEs in loan facilities, especially to help them cope with cash flow issues. I understand many SMEs are having cash flow issues. I hope the banking industry can be more generous in offering loan facilities. Earlier, the government and the Hong Kong MA have called on the banks to heed this appeal, and I hope they would certainly do something about it. Apart from tax reductions, it's hoped that the government can offer some assistance through dedicated funds to help SMEs in different ways. For example, if SMEs cannot pay for their employees, and the employees have to go, perhaps the government could provide subsidy in the form of training allowance, so that the SMEs can keep them while the employees receive further training. And then when the economic situation improves, these employees will not be out of jobs in the meantime. They will be kept for the purpose of training, and at the same time, government funds can provide subsidies to make it possible. This will be good for employment and retention of workers. This will help SMEs as well as their employees. President, we hope in the light of the current situation, the government would relax the rules for SMEs. Apart from tax reductions, we have many funds, BUD funds, SME loan guarantee, SME marketing, the funds, etc., to help them. But many SMEs have told us that the application procedure is rather complicated. So I hope the government can do some streamlining with the procedure so as to facilitate the application process. It's hoped that the SAR government can do more to cut the red tape to help SMEs. President, we have been appealing to the government for different measures to cope with the current economic situation so as to help the SMEs and the general public when they face economic difficulties. Many pro-establishment camp members have also spoken on the need to stop the violence. We hope that the social order can be restored and calmness can return. We have heard from many people on the street that they do not dare to go out because of what happened during weekends. We have people hurling petrol bombs. We have seen shops vandalized, and some people set fire to ATM machines. And they have there are cases where the people would take the law into their own hands and attack people who don't see eye to eye with them. This has created a lot of social confusion. We hope the government would take resolute measures to stop the violence. We understand the police are facing a tremendous pressure, and it's not an easy situation that they are grappling with. I hope the SAR government would come up with the right initiatives to stop violence. And it's also hope that violence will not be further escalated. We know that for whatever reason behind such violence, the end result is that many innocent people will be harmed, and this city will be undermined. I hope everyone will understand, for whatever reasons they might have, resorting to violence will ultimately hurt Hong Kong, our home, and as well as other innocent people. So I hope all the social sectors can join hands to appeal to end the violence so that we can restore some basic calmness and order and the return of the rule of law. Otherwise, Hong Kong will be mired in endless violence, and the end result will be the destruction of our home. So I submit.
Mr. Michael Look.
主席，
President, today we are considering the Inland Revenue Amendment Tax Concessions Bill 2019. The scrutiny should have been completed before the summer, but due to the controversy around the Fugitive Offenders Ordinance Amendment, we have seen a series of violent protests, and on the 1st of July, the electoral complex was encroached by rioters, and the council business was halted, and we had to wait till today before examining this bill. The damage has been done to Hong Kong, but how do we restore our society and hold the violence? This is our top priority. In August, the government announced enhanced tax reduction measures to increase the deduction from 75% to 100%, while retaining the $20,000 ceiling per case. So this this is what we can consider a consolation. So for families in financial hardship, if they can save $20,000 on taxes, it is certainly good news, and this might also help some SMEs because many businesses are hit hard, especially for sectors like tourism, retail, catering, transportation, etc. Many people face a pay cut, and those who are on commission are also making a lot less. So in theory, the reductions can somewhat ease the pressure. But we see that our public finance approach offers room for improvement. Every year, we enjoyed a huge fiscal surplus. Whenever the government has a surplus, and they face a headache on how to give out benefits or money. Why did we enjoy such a big surplus every year? Of course, having a surplus is a good thing. We are talking about dozens or up to $1 billion in surplus every year due to the wrongful estimates. And the reason is that we rely heavily on land revenue. For example, revenue from land sales or property transactions such as stamp duties. So these are non-operating revenue which can fluctuate wildly. When the market is rosy, the surplus is up to $100 million, and when the market is in decline, we can go into a negative. So the government is reluctant to make such commitments regular, and the money often goes to the Capital Works Reserve Fund, and the fund has snowballed without the public knowing how it can be spent, and the conflicts would only deepen. This is unhealthy, and in terms of public finance, I think we are not tackling the root of the issue. In terms of land sales or stamp duty from property transactions, the revenue is substantial. And 15 years ago, land revenue made up 8% of the government's total revenue, and from 2015 to 20 onwards, it rose to almost 20%. And if we consider stamp duty and property-related expenditure, they made up almost 40% of government income. The percentage is extremely high, and the government would consider land revenue something untouchable. The high land revenue for the government means that properties are extremely expensive. Rent is extremely high for both residential, commercial properties. So for the public and SMEs, their burden is getting heavier. So such form of so-called indirect rental tax is unhealthy. The government should not be imposing taxes on behalf of developers. This is leading to domination by property developers. Land prices are very sensitive to market changes. So long as land remains unsold, the government's revenue would shrink and we might actually see a deficit. So in terms of the public finance policy, one of Hong Kong's biggest edge is that we have a simple and low tax regime. But are low taxes always the best answer? If that's the case, then the Cayman Islands should be the best place to be. Hong Kong should embrace the rule of law. Of course, the rule of law is being challenged at the moment, but we must remember our competitive edge. Low taxes are not the holy grail. For businesses who make a lot of money, they don't mind paying 1 or 2% more of taxes. The key is whether their businesses are profitable. If the answer is no, then the tax rates would not mean anything. So we should maintain a good business environment in Hong Kong so that businesses who operate in Hong Kong can make reasonable profits, and this is how they would want to invest in Hong Kong. We should not be touting low tax rates. There has been a reform in our profits tax regime in order to help SMEs. From 2018 to 2019, a two-tier profits tax regime was introduced for SMEs. For those with accessible profits under $2 million, the tax rate was reduced to 8.25%, and the tax rate of 16.5% would apply if the profit is more than $2 million. And compared to advanced economies, our tax rates are still the lowest. In 2016 to 17, among 106.7 thousand tax-paying corporations, only 6.5% had accessible profits above $10 million, but they contributed 88% of the taxes. So for companies with accessible profits above $10 million, they contributed almost 90% of all taxes. So if we raise their tax rates slightly, the overall tax revenue for the government would balloon. When we look at tax returns of big corporations, including these companies, they are paying a lot of taxes. And in 2017 to 18, Sun Hung Kai Properties paid $4.6 million, MTRC 1.9, the Ling REIT 1.9, Swire $630 million, Cathay $350 million, CLP 1.07, Bank of China $5.7 billion, HSBC Holdings $12 billion. So these are some of the big names you all know. So for these mega corporations, many of them are paying hundreds of millions of dollars or dozens of billions of dollars of profit taxes. If you raise their tax rate by 1 to 2%, our progressive profits tax rate would guarantee a stable hike in our tax revenue without affecting the SMEs. So corporations with a net profit above $50 billion should be subject to an extra 1% of tax. So this is to ensure vertical fairness. So for those who are able or those who enjoy economies of scale or a dominating position, they should be able, and they are also obliged to pay more taxes. A healthy business environment allows them to make so much money, and the MTRC is protected by policies, and thus they are making a lot of money. They should give back to the community. And in terms of vertical justice, well, in the current saga, a lot of dissatisfactions were exposed. There was foreign influence, but the government has to review the real reasons, and that is the distribution of wealth is serious. Hong Kong's Gini's coefficient is 0.539. Elsewhere in the world, riots would have broken out a long time ago already, and unfortunately, that is what we are seeing now. So we have to tackle the unequal distribution of resources, and we must reform our tax regime through secondary distribution and policies for different sectors. And such redistribution should be spent on different areas, and cash benefits should be handed out. You must let the people know that we are going in the right direction, and that they would realize that they can share the fruits of the benefits, and that is how they would stop thinking about going for a scorched-earth policy. We ask that the police must enforce the law seriously, and the society must collectively say no to violence. But to resolve the internal conflicts, we must first do something about the unfair distribution of resources, and we must dispose with a laissez-faire approach from the colonial times. We must give up the approach of having a small government and a big market, and we see a lot of dissatisfaction, and the public must see commitment from the government that they are trying to make a change for the better, and that way the evil guys or politicians who embrace populism would not be able to stand ground. So in the extradition law amendment exercise, we hope the public, we propose a progressive structure for profit tax, and that is how we can achieve vertical justice. Thank you very much.
主席，
Miss Elizabeth Quiet. The bill supposed to have finished this scrutiny at the Bills Committee and was supposed to be voted on the 21st of June meeting. However, the council failed to convene that day, and the legislative complex was vandalized. So the last two council meetings have been cancelled, and this bill had been delayed till today. This bill had offered a tax relief for tax concessions, tax reduction on salary, tax under person assessment, and profit tax to subject to a ceiling of $20,000 to could benefit over 1 million, involving $19.8 billion. In the context of Sino-U.S. trade war and the anti-extradition crisis, Hong Kong is on the brink of recession. As the violent protest has been escalating, the impact on the hotel, F&B, and the tourism industry have been hit hard. In face of current challenges, the DAB had welcomed Financial Secretary had adopted our suggestions, and on August 15, announced further reduction from 75% to full 100%, with this ceiling stay at $20,000. And the new foregone measures would cost about $8 and $1 billion, would reduce the taxpayers' burden. Just tax cut itself is not enough. Our top urgent priority is must curb the violence and safeguard the rule of law, so to expedite the return to normal. So otherwise, more tax cut would not able to help the public to emerge from the chaos. Since June, the violent protests have been escalating. We see the rioters getting bolder by the day, from attacking officers, police station, and police vehicle, and more recently have appeared and calling for police to be murdered. And people actually heed such advice. And there were petrol bombs and roadside bombs. And each protest, petrol bombs were thrown. And there were extensive vandalism of government property. The electrical complex have just been restored, and glass panel is still being replaced. And at MTR stations, a lot of the facilities have yet to be fully restored, which severely hampered our economy and lifestyle. And the airport blockade in beating up passengers and intimidating them, they have a huge damage to our global reputation. Our passenger throughput have been affected, and there are a lot of vigilante justice on people with different political opinions, so they would get hit as soon as they raise their mobile phones. And there were large-scale attacks on PRC-owned banks and restaurants and shops that support the police. Not only they were vandalize and get the store, they will even set fire into the shops. These acts are despicable. They will not only led to the sharp reduction of mainland tourists, and also instill a lot of fear in the public. Nobody dared to go at night because they're worried that the MTR might stop, and wouldn't dare going out on weekends because they know where the rioters will be heading. Nobody dared to spend money. We have less tourists coming, but the local wouldn't dare to spend. In the traditional shopping spots like Mongkok and Causeway Bay, it felt like deserted in the weekends. When we have a bad public order, our retail and the hotel and industry, even beauty parlor, which support a lot of grassroots population, their financial is in dire strait. And for 29th of September to 6th of October, our inflow visitors had dropped by 31%. And Lowu, there was a sharp drop of 40%. And that's the lowest in 9 years of Golden Week. For a large-scale event, whether it was sport, tournament, international exhibition, and concerts have been cancelled one after another. The retail sales volume had dropped by 7 months in a row, and we expect further drops. And some shops need to be closed frequently. And those working in service and retail industry, that the shopping centers may close without notice on weekends. That means they're going to make money, because weekend is supposed to be their peak, and yet the shopping centers will not cut their rent. A lot of shops like restaurants have closed for good. I know that anecdotally over 300 restaurants have closed. Even if they didn't lose their job, a lot of those working in those industries on unpaid furlough, and a lot of them have lost their job. Our retail figures have kept on plummeting 7 months in a row. Record the biggest drop in August. And recently I met the reps in the beauty and the retail industry. Currently there are no customers coming. On the weekends was supposed to be the boom periods, nobody was coming. what they had in mind is not for the government to help them borrow more money or even guarantee of their loans. They're thinking about if they take out their loan, they may not able to pay back. They're wondering, should they close now or later? Should they mortgage their flat to tide over this few months, and yet there is no dawn in sight, and yet business have dropped by half or 70%. A lot of these live on commissions. They have a sharp pay cut. What should they do next? Yesterday, I met some IT company. The foreign investor have hold up any future plans. They have planned for money to come, and yet the money will not arrive. All the investment projects were on hold. They start laying off people. They had hired a lot of talent, and they laid them out reluctantly, and dozens of people, staff being paid over $100,000 a month, were laid off. And the government must come up with ways besides tax cut. What else can you help the different enterprise and different sectors to protect their jobs, and how to tie them over this difficult period? And some sectors propose it's time that the government must discuss with the private developer to offer rent relief to support SMEs. And the banks should urge the banks should not call back the loans and forcing them to pay back. And now that a lot of the staff was on unpaid leave, shouldn't you support them to provide technical training or retraining so they can master new skills in preparing for the future? And a lot of people wouldn't dare to start a business in Hong Kong. Should capitalize on the Greater Bay Area. Should the government enhance the effort in entrepreneurship in GBA, for example, providing interest-free loans? The government must consider these options. We also, well, in case we're successful in curbing the unrest, how do we encourage visitors coming back and attracting them and stimulate domestic consumption? The government must think hard in how making the SME preserve this glimmer of hope. The key here is to curb the unrest. Only after restore social order, then we can make the public, the business sector, and investor to restore the confidence and to shake off this current dilemma. For the extradition bill protests 4 months on, we still see a lot of violence. So these are shielded by and democracy and freedom, and fall from hurling bricks and petrol bombs, and now we have homemade bombs. When will this violence stop? Resorting to violence can help you get democracy, and depriving other people's freedom, would you call that justice? Recently online, there's an article by the late James Wong. The title called True and Fake Democracy. Allow me to read out the article. Mr. Wong said, democracy must be got through democratic means. However, it's difficult on a very slow pace because it includes you, me, and him. We all have different backgrounds. We are different social status with different goals and expectations. We must understand one another and respect mutual positions, and cannot there are 6 million of us. We can't sacrifice one for the other. Thus, this pace of democracy might be slow, and there's a long road ahead. However, we can accelerate. However, we must lobby for democracy, democratic means, because if it resorts to undemocratic means, that it will not come. Otherwise, it will only undermine democracy. If we couldn't understand, we can only law with them. We couldn't attack or oppress. If I haven't agreed, you cannot subjugate me. We are all equally important and should be equally respected. That we call real democracy. There are a lot of fake democracy activists, and Hong Kong people should stay alert. In this legislative code, we see a lot of fake democratic legislators in the holding the democratic banner and keep glorifying violence. They use their own violence to tolerate and accommodate violence or rationalize the violence. We see those at the opposition camp in this solemn chamber insulting and putting down government officials and other legislators. Not only verbally, they could hurl things and snatch things. They would charge at speakers. This have setting a terrible role model. They have misled the Hong Kong's young generation, which mistook them as their way to express their opinion and a solution. Some opposition camp members are present at those violence protests and got in the way of the police. They chose to look the other way of this black-clad people violence to keep criticizing the police enforcement operations just because of this legislators inciting anti-government sentiments and politicize everything and object to everything related to China because they have indulged in violence, which made a lot of people think that violence is acceptable, which led Hong Kong to this tumultuous state and made this embolden the protesters. The pandemic legislators are the culprit of this current massacre and urged Hong Kong public to denounce with this violence. Is not a solution. It will not make our future better. Violence will not bring Hong Kong independence. It would only undermine our collective interests. To not only undermine the government, you are harming Hong Kong's everyone. That's what you and I and him. We all love Hong Kong. How could we allow the violence to destroy our home? I hope that the Hong Kong public should be united and support us to say no to violence. But stop the violence, restore the social order, and safeguard our rule of law is the only way to let the early recovery our economy and return us on the right track. Thank you, President.
Dr. Priscilla Leung, President, I rise to speak in support of the Inland Revenue Amendment Tax Concession Bill 2019. We know today when we discuss the bill, it seems that this bill is getting no result. It's going nowhere. As the saying goes, the elephant is still in the room. The biggest problem we face is still there. Notwithstanding, when it comes to livelihood and public interest, as long as we have a chance to have a discussion, we should seize the time to do whatever we can for our people. Today we have a chance to speak in the normal way. Many people have asked me whether they will be given a chance to view this council meeting, and the coverage is not just about point of order or some other side issues without paying attention to the business proper. Well, this may be just a minor issue. It may not be a big deal to many people, but we have to make it serious, and so that people can regain the feeling that this council does pay due attention to livelihood issues. Although this is just something a stopgap in measure, the FS has announced a number of relief measures. The the occasion is not opportune, but people are not in a good mood. They don't want to listen to what they are told. But can we just say these measures are no good? I won't say so. Many suggestions have been accepted coming from the political parties, including my party, so I welcome some of the measures. When it comes to the tax reduction of profits tax, personal assessment tax, and profits tax, and the raising of the percentage limit to 100%, cap at $20,000 per case, that's welcome. And also the CSSA recipient will get an extra month of standard payment. That's also welcome. And also $2,000 of rebate in electricity tariff. That's also welcome, although it's just piecemeal. And students will get $2,500 in an allowance. That will be regularized. That's good. And also the public rental housing tenants will get 1 month of rent waived. That's also welcomed. You may think these are just minor issues, apart from the regular relief measures. People expected to get something more serious or in-depth, but I always welcome new measures, such as one-off cash allowance to those who are waiting for public rental housing, because you don't want to jack up the rent. So for these people queuing for PLH, we have been asking for some assistance to be given to them. Actually, I used this term when we had the Lehman Brothers incident. And that is the middle class is the most vulnerable class. These people who are not qualified, who are not eligible for PLH, and now you with the mortgage ceiling raised from 8 million to 10 billion, well, they simply cannot afford to buy a home. These are young couples. They have talked to us, and some younger colleagues of ours belong to this group. At this time, they won't get any help in terms of the rent subsidy. We're talking about some $60,000 as the family income, and if you just rent a small unit, it will cost them $18,000. That's a big chunk of their report. For the infants from 0 to 3, their parents will get an allowance of for tax deduction of $30,000. Well, that should be further explored. In 2008, is Professor Chen Ga-kyung. I suggested to him that there should be a $1 billion of fund to help the unemployed. Those affected by the Lehman Brothers case were in their primes, in their 40s. They can be turned into the individual in economic participants Many people lost their job because of the Lehman Brothers case. They didn't want to rely on CSSA. They loved to work. Today, I would say $1 billion will not be sufficient. The government should be more broad-minded. I would say $5 billion should be given to help them. You have to broaden your horizons. As things stand, many young people would like to go to the Greater Bay Area to seek their future. Well, that comes with a cost. There's always a cost with the opportunity. Not all entrepreneurs succeed. But we have to look at it as a long-term investment. If 1 out of 100 succeed, and if we are not talking about Mr. Ma Hua-teng or Mr. Jack Ma, well, these two gentlemen are not very academically inclined, but they are very good at high-tech and new technology, and they both were resilient enough to survive the lowest ebb of their development phase. And then they could later enjoy the fruit of success with their collaborators. These people can survive even when their enterprise faced the grimmest prospect at some time. We're talking about young people, and their businesses are at the brink of collapse. Many are sole proprietorship, small businesses cannot cope with the current economic situation, and they would go under when the current lease expires. They have to close early, for example, at 7 p.m. And if they have put up posters supporting the pro-establishment camp, they are afraid of being vandalized. So the consumption atmosphere is very poor, as witnessed by the retail industry. I went to the McPherson playground to officiate at an opening ceremony. At a wonton noodle shop, the business owner only hired one female worker. She said that she would do everything to make the business going because she didn't want to dismiss his or her employee who has been helping her for many years. So when I talk to this SME business, well, she wept when we continued this discussion. It's a storm worse than Mangkhut. Has the government done everything to help us deal with the aftermath of the typhoon? Can we have some innovative ideas? Can we ask the civil servants to think out of the box? Well, the civil service performs very well when everything is plain sailing. So perhaps you have a war room to come up with the typhoon prevention measures by involving the outsiders, people outside the civil service. Get experts, even overseas experts, to enable us to survive this crisis. Survival is the first objective. The government should teach people how to fish instead of giving people fish. We're talking about people in their 40s or 50s who are about to lose their jobs, and they need to get on to another platform. They need to transform. And they have asked us to get the government agree to offer the $2 transport concession if they retire at 55. If they want to start their own business, they should be offer training. And they are talking about turning themselves into security guards because there's a labor shortage in that sector. I sort of agree with them. Don't ask the police to do everything, even to clear off the waste on the street. I think everyone should deal with the mess in whatever way we can. And then you have people vandalizing different things. They are not renovation workers. A middle-aged man cried when we talk about this. They couldn't bear to see young people behaving that. And we need family counselors. These people in the same family do not talk to each other. How can we restore the family spirit under the Lion Rock? And some members are still trying to blackmouth Hong Kong by going to overseas countries to ask them to sanction Hong Kong. We're not talking about sanctioning the big businesses, but SMEs and ordinary people. These immature young people, and they even resort to violence. They are rioters without knowing it. Adults, especially in the political arena, should not use their terms that we go down together. Or some members here who don't agree with us say that, we should just go down together. You are trying to find excuses or trying to shield them. And the electrical meeting time is so precious. People would like to seek a way out. Although we don't have the same political views, I think the pro-establishment camp have to review our work and also to make improvements. But the other camps, the other side, should not try to find excuses for violence. Don't make this electrical into a rubbish council. We should work together to find some hope. After the severe storm, we can see the dawn again as a family under the Lion Rock.
Mr. Yu Si-wing, President, this bill aims to implement the tax reduction measures proposed in February to offer a 75% reduction of salaries, tax under personal assessment, and profits tax, subject to a ceiling of $20,000 per case. With the extradition law saga, a series of measures were announced by the government in August to increase the tax deduction from 75% to 100%, subject to the same ceiling of $20,000. In recent budgets, similar tax relief measures were announced to alleviate the burden on the middle class and SMEs, and to stimulate consumption and to stimulate the economy as a whole. Such relief would benefit retail and tourism and create a virtuous cycle. And as such, I support the relief proposal. in the anti-extradition law saga and the escalation of violent protests. These created a heavy stress on many industries, including our tourism. In August and September this year, the number of inbound tourists dropped by 30 to 40%, and in October, like the government said, the drop exceeded 50%. For outbound visitors in September, according to the TICHK, there was a decline of more than 30%, and the butterfly effect was obvious. Retail revenue in August and September dropped by 23%, and more than 500 restaurants closed down. Let's look at some of the features of our tourism industry. From an economic perspective, tourism involves many different aspects, and according to statistics from the World Tourism Organization, modern tourism can facilitate 110 industries, and tourism spending contribute more than 90% of the accommodation industry and more than 40% to the catering industry. Every one tourism dollar can lead to $4.3 of additional income elsewhere. With every new tourism practitioner, 4.2 jobs will be created. And jobs can be created for low-skilled labor, and tourism can facilitate grassroots employment. From a green perspective, tourism creates relatively little pollution, and the promotion of cultural heritage can also reinforce conservation education. In terms of marketing, tourists can enhance the global reputation of a city, and employment can be boosted, and the tourism industry, according to government figures, it makes up 5% of our GDP. Direct employment amounts to 270,000 for related industries like retail, catering, and transportation. Altogether, total employment exceeds 800,000. So with a decline in tourists, then the other industries would also be hit. The decline in visitor numbers is a short-term symptom, but going forward, there are a lot of uncertainties, especially when we were hit by violent protests. We saw that a number of mega events were cancelled due to the violent protests, including the Formula E championships. And the venue would be hosted in Morocco instead, due to the social sentiments and vandalism of public utilities or facilities. A number of events and mega events will be cancelled or were already cancelled, including the National Day Parade, Hong Kong Cyclothon, the Wine and Dine Festival, the Harbour Swim, etc. The cancellation of mega events has disappointed the organizers and visitors, and the organizers were frustrated because a lot of work went into the preparation of these events. If such events are to be cancelled, the organizers would suffer heavy losses. The cancellations lead to losses for us and affect our tourism sector, and it would affect the prospects of Hong Kong hosting mega events in the future. Apart from the mega events, many exchanges on a community level have also been affected. LCSD venues had to close early, including the Cultural Center, the Sishu Center, and a number of exchanges or competitions with international students have stalled. Hong Kong has always welcomed exchange tours in which parents would also attend. At the end of the events, they would go around and shop in Hong Kong, and they are high-spending overnight visitors. On the short run, even if order can be restored at Hong Kong, and even if FIT and short-haul visitors return to Hong Kong, these high-spending visitors or the group visitors will not return in a short time, and this would affect the revival of tourism. So we hope the current problems can go away and that peace can be restored. If we look at our neighboring Macau, they are relatively peaceful. By the end of the year, they will host a series of mega events, including the Grand Prix, the Macau Food Festival, Macau International Marathon, etc. And with the formation of the Bay Area Living Circle, it has become a habit for residents to travel in and spend in the area, and Macau has run out as winners because there are concerns over Hong Kong's environment. So with the mega events that take place around us, and if we continue to lose these mega events, the high spending and high value added visitors are going to leave us. The last major tourism decline was 2003 during SARS, and afterwards the government introduced FIT, which saved our declining economy. And with the cooperation of government and different stakeholders, promotions targeting overseas markets and visitors were rolled out, and the market revived swiftly, and so did the economy. So we hope that if we are to see a revival, the people of Hong Kong would stand united and work hard together. Now the visitors are not coming, and the tourism industry could only save themselves. We have to rely on local consumption. Many hotels have recently turned to the local market by offering accommodation packages for Hong Kong Disneyland and Ocean Park. They have introduced some different discount or combo packages, and hopefully these can ease the impacts on tourism and tourism practitioners. However, our population is only some $7 million. The size or population base is still limited. So through various measures, we hope we can weather the storm, and then we can find a way out. With regards to the challenges facing the tourism industry, the government listened to our views and implemented a series of helpful measures, including waiving license fees for hotels, guest houses, and restaurants, and the Tourism Industry Council license fee, and providing financing arrangements for SMEs. Today, a cash incentive program was rolled out for travel agents from November to March next year. For every overnight visitor, the agency can receive a cash allowance of 100 to 120 subject to a ceiling of $60,000. But while these measures would certainly be rather helpful, I hope the government would roll out more of the same soon. And we have some recommendations. First of all, given the current uncertainties, we hope the government would further increase the rebate ratio in order to relieve the burden for the people. So the tax relief is capped at $20,000 per case. We hope in the future the cap would be increased to $30,000 or $40,000. Apart from tax rebates, the government should roll out other alleviation measures to stimulate consumption. For instance, can airport departure taxes and the airport construction fees be waived for a specific period? That way, more people will want to fly, and this would boost tourism. The third recommendation is that given the weak retail scene now, retail vouchers can be issued. And in 2003, Taiwan distributed $3,600 new Taiwan dollars worth of retail vouchers, and they took out a $85 billion loan to roll out the vouchers. And in 2009, Hangzhou also gave out 150 million yuan dollars worth of vouchers to the Long River Delta areas, and these would greatly help hotels, restaurants, and the like. So given that everyone is reluctant to spend, stimulating consumption can help boost tourism and local retail. And given the current sentiments, the government should request Ocean Park and Disneyland to provide bargain deals to Hong Kong people. These are our tourist destinations, and the government can even subsidize disadvantaged groups in our community so that more people can get to know about Hong Kong. Hong Kong is facing an unprecedented crisis. The tax reduction would help the tourism trade, but not all problems are resolved. I hope the government would be brave and innovative and come up with more pragmatic tax measures to stimulate our economy. Thank you. I support the passage of the bill.
暫停明天9時。
Meeting will be suspended or recommend at 9 o'clock in the morning.